Hi, everyone. Let's start off with the economic data today. Then we'll get straight into the charts. And then we'll take a look at my results for the day and my positions going into Monday. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So looking at PCE data, everything came in pretty good. Expectations were met on core PCE month over month as well as year over year. And then the PCE price index for year over year as well as month over month, they say it was worse than expected, but it's actually better here. So 5% versus 5.5. So it went down. Month over month was 0.1 versus 0.2 expected, also going down. Personal income went up 0.2%. Definitely not what you want to see. That means wages are still going higher. And then looking at personal spending, that actually went down more than expected, so minus 0.2%. The economy is weakening, and that continues to be seen here. So basically, everything was either at expectations or better, besides personal spending. Definitely not what you want to see. I also want to highlight pending home sales ticked back up in a big way, 2.5% here over the previous month, versus the expected minus 0.1%. So that's a big spread versus the expected to what we got, showing a little bit of strength in the home market. Pretty interesting there. And as a result of these things, you can see here we do have a 98.4% chance that they're going to do a 25 basis point hike to a 4.5 to 4.75 spread, and the 1.6% chance that they don't do anything at all. Very unlikely. I don't think they're going to pause yet. I think 25 basis points is what's going to happen, especially based on the results we got from PCE today. Looking at earnings here for next week, just for a moment, I'm not going to go over all of them. I just want to talk about Thursday because that is the big day. So we have FOMC on Wednesday the 1st, where we get our 25 basis points hike. And then Thursday's the big day. We have Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Eli Lilly, Merck & Co., Shell, Bristol Myers, Conoco, Qualcomm, Honeywell, Starbucks, Sony, and Estee Lauder all on the same day. Huge amount of earnings here. You can see we have $3 trillion companies and one being more than $2 trillion. I think they did get a little bit below $2 trillion. I'm not sure if that's still accurate here, but huge amount of earnings coming in on that day. And we'll have to see what plays out. So that's going to be a big mover for the markets. We definitely have to keep an eye on that, especially coming off of the FOMC. Even if we get our 25 basis points like we expect, sometimes the markets do weird things when we finally get that result from the FOMC and their comments. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&P 500 here on the 1 hour and the daily chart. So looking at that huge wick that we got here today, all the way up to 408, did not quite take out those highs. So we do have a little bit to go if we're going to do that. We talked about it yesterday, 410 being the number. We got to get above 410. You'd like to see a close above 410 if we're going to continue higher. We talked about a potential scenario where we touch those highs, come back, retest support down here at the trend line, somewhere around 396 or so. And then we get a bounce off of this trend line, kind of in this cradle that we had here. And then we push back up through those previous highs. Certainly a possibility. Or we could get a double top at this point. Certainly also a possibility. Perhaps we get that double top, come back into that cradle, and then push higher. And then we start this kind of as a trend here. So we have a baseline trend. And then if we do get up to resistance, that would be somewhere around 429, 430 on the daily chart. Momentum is still building. We're not overbought here on the daily chart. Although this trend has been pretty dramatic, it's been hard to trade a little bit for me. But otherwise, looking over here at the hourly chart, you can see we definitely lost momentum after we touched that 408 level. Went from 408 all the way down to 405.65 in that last hour. And really, it was within the last 15 to 20 minutes or so. And you can see we're down here a little bit after hours. Momentum on the hourly is fading. We did get overbought conditions on the hour. You would want to see this come back into that 50 level, bounce off the 50, and then you get a pushback up to overbought conditions. That would be what you're looking for on the shorter time frames. But right now, everything is still intact. We did not break down from this structure on the hourly chart. And so you have to expect that things are going to continue to go up, at least here in the short term. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the 5 and the 15-minute chart, I do want to show this a little bit closer here. So we rallied aggressively, got up to resistance, which on the NASDAQ was that previous high that we had. Did get rejection from there, and then we bounced at that level and then moved higher pretty consistently throughout the day. One slight dip here. And then right at the end of the day here, you can see we had a high, a push up into that 298 level. Retested that zone and failed really aggressively and sold off pretty strong. You can see we went from 298 all the way down to 296.20 and then went down a little bit more after hours. You can see momentum here on the 5-minute is fading slightly, but you can see how overbought we were throughout the day on the 15-minute chart. Momentum was fading throughout the day, and then once it broke here, it went pretty aggressively, pretty fast. We haven't really seen a push down like that in a while, getting all the way below the 21 on the 15-minute chart. Kind of like what we saw here, but not really at the end of the day like how aggressive that was. So this is interesting. Definitely going to keep an eye on that. Did pick up some short-term short positions on this down move. A little bit neutral, but slightly bearish. And we'll take a look at those positions a little bit later. I do want to jump over to the 4-hour and the daily chart just to see what this looks like. You can see we did get above that previous trend line that we've been watching from the previous highs. Did close above it, looks pretty strong. Certainly could expect a retest of that level down at 293 and then a continuation if that's what we're going to get. Certainly possible. You can also see these shorter term trend lines that I was watching on the 4-hour chart. We got above both of those as well here today. But we do have this channel that we're watching on the 4-hour, which did hold again here at the close. So got up quite a bit above that point and then sold off right to that level. And you could certainly expect a move back down to this lower end of the range, back down to maybe 289, 290. There is quite a bit of support levels in here now, so you do have to keep an eye on that. But based on this channel, there's a little bit of room for downside. If we do move this up here and you see we roll over maybe down to like 291, 292, and then you would expect support to come back in if this channel is to hold. So did get above resistance. Upside of this channel is still holding, so the risk is still to the downside. Not a lot of upside potential here in the short term, which is part of why I picked up those positions. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, you can see the Russell got right up to previous highs back from December and the end of November here, right at those highs, touched that resistance definitely, hit it on all levels, got all the way up to 190. Although this top trend line did hold again right at the end of the day, you could certainly see a situation where this overthrows and then come down through. This does kind of look like a rising wedge here and definitely be pretty bearish if we did get like an overthrow and a push down. Then you would have to be looking at a retest of the 4-hour 200 SMA all the way down at 181. That'd be about a 10% down move that you would need to be looking for. A little bit of risk to the downside at this point, so definitely keep an eye on that. Moving over to the Dow, you can see we came into that trend line held, did sell off into the end of the session, didn't look like it was going to hold, got all the way up to 340, 150 or so. Did not retest all of these levels like everything else has been doing. The gap fill is back here at 343. So I was kind of looking for that. I wondered if the Dow would rally up and fill that gap. But at this point, it looks like this is going to roll over. We're at resistance. We threw several big wicks through that point. We're selling off into the end of the session. Momentum is fading here on the 4-hour. To me, this really just looks like the Dow is getting ready to roll over and start doing a little bit of a retrace here. And if the Dow does start to roll over, that will affect the other markets, even if the Dow has been the weakest market here in the short term. Moving over to Apple and Tesla, both of these basically went bananas today. You can see we rallied throughout both sessions, did fade here a little bit at the end of the day on Apple. Still looking for that earnings on Thursday. But Tesla earnings, we talked about it already. Tesla outperformed and they put out good guidance. Markets like that, and we rallied all the way up to 180. Very bullish here. Let's switch that over to the daily chart to see what it looks like. We're definitely at resistance. We're at those previous lows going back to the end of November. If we do get through that level, you'd be looking at the top of the range at basically $200 a share. Certainly could get to that level, but you're at resistance here and you do think that you probably are going to get some kind of retrace. This move has gone parabolic at this point. Certainly could go higher, certainly could get up to that 200 level, but that would be where I would be taking profits at the absolute latest. I don't think we're going to go back to the moon here on Tesla. $200 take profit at the latest, probably taking profit right now if I've been riding this to the upside. Moving back over to Apple here, we're at that resistance level on the 4-hour. You can see we've been watching that for a while. We did overthrow it here a little bit, did have a big wick at the end of the day. Certainly got some resistance at that point, going back to the previous highs from December 13th, getting into that zone, which definitely seems like a solid supply zone, and this rally has been relentless. Certainly seems like we need a retrace and a cooling period, but everything is still intact and you do have to be bullish on things until they start to show those bearish trends. Moving over to consumer staples and consumer discretionary on the 4-hour charts. You can see consumer staples continues to go sideways. It has found support at the 200 SMA on the 4-hour chart, continues to hold. Does seem like it might get some bullish price action going into early next week. Momentum is slightly fading here, but you can see EMAs are moving higher, and it does seem like we're getting a solid amount of support from that 200 SMA. Moving over to consumer discretionary, we've been watching this expanding wedge here to the upside, and we did get all the way up to retest the upside of that expanding wedge. Definitely looks like we're at resistance at this point. You would expect it to come down at least a little bit and start to retest some of these lows. We did leave a gap here from 141.80 up to 142.20, so definitely could come back and fill that gap. Definitely something to watch out for. And right now you have to assume that the risk is to the downside, being at that upside resistance. Last time we were in this zone, you can see we moved down for 3 consecutive candles here, which is a pretty solid sell-off. Ended up being about 4.5%, almost 5%. Moving over to the transportation ETF on the hour and the daily chart. Start off with the hour here. You can see we did continue that rally that we had basically throughout the day after the big down move in the morning. So we had the big rally yesterday and then continued that move all the way up to almost filling the gap. You thought we might get all the way up to that 232, 233 level, but we didn't quite do it. And it seems like we have a pretty solid double top in here at this point. So we threw a big wick, found support down here at 229 or so, then got all the way back up to 231 and then got really strong rejection from that level once again. And at this point, you have to see a really strong push through 231. Otherwise, you have to assume that we're going to be pushing back to the downside. Momentum on the daily chart really starting to fade here. You would expect this to probably cross over Monday, maybe Tuesday. And then you would expect this to roll back over and push down to maybe 223, 222, retesting support down here. Does seem like we're going to be moving lower here on transports. You can see that big wick that we had on Thursday here. And then we did get the continuation the next day on the daily chart. So a little bit of strength here, but if we do push down on Monday and Tuesday, you have to assume we're going to move lower. This momentum to me says we're going lower, and then you can see RSI is below the EMA. Does look like we're going to retest that on the EMA here. And then if we get that rejection, transports start to sell off, you have to assume that the Dow is going to be moving lower, which will likely cause the other markets to move lower as well. Moving over to semiconductors, basically another flat day. So yesterday we gapped up, moved down, rallied throughout the session, and then once again, basically the same iteration, gapped down, rallied throughout the session, and then closed slightly red into the end of the day. So definitely seems like we're consolidating here a little bit on semiconductors after the really strong rally that we had. Semiconductors were one of the strongest sectors. And if we do zoom out here, you can see the upside of this channel is all the way up at like 250, 253, 254 maybe. But it does seem like we're running into some resistance here going back to these August highs. I don't know if we're going to get above those previous highs. We are above this December high here now. But like I said, we have that strong resistance at the August highs, and then the next level would be the trend line up here at 256. But looking at the hourly chart, it does seem like we're going to be moving lower here. You can see the EMAs on the MACD moving lower, momentum ticking to the downside. It was pretty weak throughout the day, but slightly red at the close. RSI moving down as well below the EMA. Did get overbought conditions yesterday on the RSI, slightly below it, like 69.09. So didn't hit that full 70, but does look pretty weak here, ticking off the overbought condition. We do get below the EMA here on the daily chart, then you have to assume that we're going to be moving lower. Momentum still basically flat. Does seem like a lower high is going to form here on the EMAs versus the previous high from November. Got all the way up to 845 at that high. And right now, if we do roll over, we're at 7.33. So if we do get a nice rollover, we do have divergence on the EMAs. That would definitely be interesting. And you would expect semiconductors to roll over at that point. So looking for that divergence, but right now, still in that bullish trajectory and a slightly bullish trend here on the hourly chart. Moving over to stocks above their 50-day and 20-day moving averages. You can see the 20-day chart did tick down slightly, despite all the EMAs moving higher. So that is interesting. We do have divergence on the 20-day average chart. So you would expect this to continue to roll over. Momentum is very weak. And if this does start to move down, then you would expect stocks to go down with it. Moving over to the 50-day chart, basically flat from day to day. It was slightly bearish here, and we are still much lower than we were at the January 13th highs. So more stocks participating at that point than are participating now, despite the higher highs, which you could certainly make the argument that this rally is starting to weaken at that point. Definitely keeping an eye on these going into next week if this does start to roll over. Even if stocks go higher, that does tend to point to lower prices in the future. Taking a look at yields, you can see we rallied into the morning session looking for that PCE announcement and then pretty much sold off from there. We got right up to that resistance point that we've been tracking for a while, basically at 3.56. We've been looking at that level for quite a while. And we came right there, sold off exactly from that point, and you can see we're moving lower now. PCE was in line with expectations or slightly better, and basically yields are moving down because of that. We're not likely to get that 50 basis points, so bond yields are starting to calm down a little bit. If this does continue to trend down and maybe we break some support here on the 10-year, then you could see markets move slightly higher. But right now, the 2-year is holding fairly strong, and the 10-year is still stuck within this range that we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks now. Moving over to the dollar on the hour and the 4-hour, basically we went flat. We did find a little bit of support from yesterday's session into today's session, but we couldn't break out or anything. We got to the same highs, found resistance, still within this range, still right at that 102 zone. And this definitely seems like some kind of consolidation in that we're going to be going in one direction or the other, but we just don't know quite what that's doing yet. So we have really strong movement higher here on the EMAs. Does seem like we could be moving higher. We had that strong overthrow of the 200 SMA, the big move down, really strong momentum to the downside, which has been cooling off for a while. And it does seem like within the next week or so, we should get some clear direction, but we've been saying that for about a week now, and we've been going sideways. So keep an eye on the dollar, still not doing much, not giving any true direction quite yet, but it does seem like it might turn bullish here going into the end of next week. Moving over to JNK, similar to the dollar, still not doing much of anything, did not participate in the rally today, so that is definitely concerning. It has not been moving up with the markets really at all over the past few weeks. It was participating early, and then it gapped down, and it has gone sideways since then. Not much to say here on JNK. You could even argue that it might be slightly bearish here. You can see the EMAs moving downwards. Slight bearish momentum on the last 4-hour candle of the day. And we closed basically at the 9 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Not much to say. Sideways price action, maybe slightly bearish. Moving over to TLT, looking at the daily chart here first. It does seem like we're forming a lower high here. So we had that previous high all the way up to almost 109. And then we gapped down. So island reversal. Tried to fill the gap. Kind of got there, and then we're selling off here once again. Today was interesting. We did gap down and then rally throughout the session, which was kind of strange. Still in this holding pattern here, going sideways, looking at the hourly chart. Slight bullish momentum going into the end of day. RSI getting above the 50 line here, so that's interesting. Definitely could go higher. Found some support at the 144 EMA, which is currently trading at 106.46. So about 50 cents of risk currently if you're going to use that as support. But right now we are above all of the EMAs here on the hourly chart, but we're kind of stuck on the 144 here on the daily chart and just below the 9 EMA as well. So kind of stuck in that range, but seeming to break out here on the hourly chart to the upside. Keep in mind that momentum on the daily chart is quite weak, and it does seem like it's going to roll over going into next week. So you do have conflicting data there between the hourly and the daily charts. Maybe we get a nice upswing into the mid-session on Monday, or even into the end of Monday into Tuesday, and then we get the crossover here on the daily chart, and then we start moving back down to the 55 EMA down around 104. That's probably what I would be looking to trade, but obviously watch the tape and don't fight the tape. Moving over to the VIX, you can see here we did get back down to that 18 level that we talked about yesterday, sold off right into that zone, and then found some support and moved a little bit higher into the end of the session with that down move that we found. So that was interesting. We did hit a bunch of resistances across a bunch of different stocks. And it seems like here that this could certainly be a level of support and that we could be moving higher going into next week. Definitely have to keep an eye on that. We got oversold conditions here on the hourly chart, similar to what we had here previously before we did get that bigger move higher. So the VIX pointing to some potential upside, which would be downside for stocks. Looking at my results for the day, you can see I netted about $1,100, so much better today. Definitely got on the right side of some trades. I was trading much better, had better confidence throughout the day, and I made good decisions, and that resulted in some profits for today, which ended up in weekly profits as well. Looking at my positions going into Monday, you can see I do have 2 covered puts here, down at 296. We are down a little bit after hours, about 10 cents, not a lot. So we're basically right here. Small profit on my shares, which is good. Small loss here on these puts so far, which is fine. Obviously, these puts can be in a loss. My max profit with this position is all the way down at 294.65 or so. So anything below 269 would be good. And I'll likely hold this position throughout the day Monday as long as we do continue to go down. Obviously, if it goes a little bit higher, I'll probably take these positions off and start repositioning for a little bit of a bull rally. But right now, I'm positioned slightly bearish going into Monday, despite the big rallies that we had throughout the day today. Let me know down in the comments where you think the markets are going to go on Monday and Tuesday. Do you think we're going to get 25 basis points? And what do you think earnings are going to do on Thursday? Huge week next week. Lots of big companies and the FOMC. So it's going to be an interesting one. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.